I'm Lindsay Garcia, bilingual coach this year, and 4th, 5th blend, but I taught kinder for 5 years and 3rd grade in ESL. So we're glad you guys could make it, and for those of you who are watching this video, thanks for taking the time to do that as well. Because you know that for kinder teachers, it's hard for everybody to come back if you're just a half-time person. So we wanted to start with this inspiring quote. The more you teach without finding out who understands the information and who doesn't, the greater the likelihood that only already proficient students will succeed. And so I think that is really what our message is, that it's really important that as you go through from the very beginning of the year until the end, that the big goal is to use our assessments to drive instruction. And so we start with the pre-assessment, and then throughout, our time until we get to our common formative assessment at the end of the quarter, we're always doing those informal ways to assess our students, and that's just the main message. And today is really to figure out how we can do that. How can we use the information from our pre-assessment to get those kids, to find out how we can differentiate for our students, and to keep them moving in different flexible groups. So I first want to start off saying that I know that for some of you this is a big shift. Well, for everybody it should be, because this is the first year, it's a learning year, and we know that being a part of this, that it is a process, and there have been mistakes, and we know that there have been, and that's okay. The main thing is that we're really trying to fix it and to make it better all the time. And but we want you to know that it's a big job, and we're all working together. There's teachers from all over the district who are a part of the group of teachers who are making these assessments. And so anyway, it's just we would appreciate your input. Don't feel bad if you find mistakes, to right away to email the district office, and they'll make those changes. So
it's definitely, it's a work in progress. It's something we're starting, we're rolling it out this year. It's a work in progress, and we got to start somewhere with it, and that's where we are, and we're going to keep rolling with it, and it's going to get better each year.
And hopefully you think of it as a tool for you, because I know that with this new with this new law that we have to report on all the standards by the end of the year. The CFAs help us to get that accomplished. It's a way to assess all the students in a common way, and it gives us all the information that we need for the end of the year when we have to report that to the parents.
All right, so I kind of did our objectives on 2 slides, but our main objective today is for teachers to be able to analyze the pre-assessment data in order to determine appropriate differentiation using cognitive adjustments. So that's the big focus today, is thinking about cognitive adjustments. So let's talk a little bit about what those are. And there are other adjustments. So there are 4 different kinds of adjustments. So cognitive adjustments are dealing with the higher level thinking that kids do, and at what level. Are we dealing with really high level thinking or lower level thinking? What are we asking our students to do? Adjustments in the content would be, you had a good way of putting it.
Figuring out what you're teaching, and then the cognitive adjustment is figuring out how you're teaching that. So the content is basically the adjustments of what
you're using.
Yeah.
And then language adjustments would be, what scaffolding are you providing to the students in terms of language so that they can accomplish the task, or how are you adjusting the language so that students can understand it, it's comprehensible to them. So talking a little bit more about, just to give you an example what this might look like. So over the first quarter, you were working with this standard. So it's Standard 1, reading information, Standard 1. With prompting and support, ask and answer questions about key details in the text. So let's say your content was working with butterflies. I think that's something you guys do this year. A DOK level 1. So DOKs, and we'll talk more about that as we get into it. I know that, actually, I'd like to take temperature a little bit. How many people are comfortable with what DOKs are? Okay. So we'll talk more about that. But a DOK level 1 is depth of knowledge. It's more base level. And so at depth of knowledge 1, you might be asking a question like, what did the caterpillar turn into? It's a factual thing. So you told the students, You know, the caterpillar started out as a caterpillar and then it turned into a butterfly. What did it turn into? It's factual.
So just remembering.
Remember.
Knowledge.
Versus as you move into DOK2, it starts to ask for a little bit higher level reasoning. So that might be getting into questions more like, why did the caterpillar go into the cocoon? So questions that are why and how and processes and that require some reasoning and thinking. So as always, we're providing this information to you folks to use, and you know your students the best, and the experts on them and how to vary your instruction for them. Your school specialists, such as speech pathologists or ERC teachers, or there's other speech pathologists, lots of them, we can be very helpful, and there's one right there, in helping helping you gain ideas for how to adjust instruction on the cognitive levels and the language levels as well. But the biggest thing is make all this your own. We're giving you all this information, but it's still you're the teachers with the kids that know them best and how to take this information and make it work for your classroom.
And then this is a neat diagram about what kind of assessments we use and when we use them. So we started out at the beginning of the year in September, and we used the pre-assessment. You guys have already done that. And then you know, we just finished doing the first common formative assessment before the end of the first quarter. But before, for some reason, they have the informal formal assessments up here, but it can also be, I always think of it as in between here, because in between the pre-assessment and the CFA, you're doing informal formative assessments in your class. And that could be a variety of things, and we could brainstorm different ways you guys do that, but just working in small groups, taking anecdotal notes, you know, maybe doing a quick assessment every week or two. So those are just kind of informal ones, and then this is the more formal one. And now we're going to get ready for quarter two pre-assessment, and that's kind of this is perfect timing because later on we're going to be talking about what do you do with your pre-assessment information, and so that'll be perfect for when you guys give that soon. And then you're going to also do all those informal formative assessments until the end of quarter two when you give the common formative assessment. And then at the very end of the semester, so around this same time here, I guess this says weeks 2 of January, and then maybe a few weeks later in February, you give what's called an interim, and we just we worked on that, where basically it tests the 6 standards that you taught. So you taught 3 in the first quarter, you're going to teach another 3 in the second quarter. And so the interim will give you really good information if they remembered all of those other standards from the very first quarter as well as the second quarter. Does that make sense? Any questions about that? Actually, it says it right here. So here's standards 1, 2, and 3 were taught in the first quarter, and then second quarter you guys are starting to teach 5, 6, and 7. So every standard in the Common Core reading has an assigned depth of knowledge like we were talking about. And so the one that we chose to get for an example is the standard 1 that you guys have already taught in the first quarter, which was with prompting and support, ask and answer questions about key details in a text. So our goal is to figure out how can we differentiate with cognitive adjustments again. So if you look at this graphic here, it kind of describes where that level 2 is. So right here is where you should be teaching to the skills and concepts, but you also of course have to teach level 1 before you even get to the level 2. So it just is a good reminder about how we need to teach kids how to produce, how they remember, and then they have to be understanding or comprehension, and then finally how do they apply that in a new way. Kindergarten only goes through DOK2, but other grades go up to 4. So but it's kind of good for you guys to know that it does go all the way up to 4 in later grades, and then you were going to...
Yeah. So I mean, as teachers, we're used to Bloom's taxonomy and using that as how we think about how to increase complexity of a task for students. So again, at the basic level, it's recall of information and knowledge and facts and that kind of information. and you go to the high end of things, which kindergartners are getting there, but it's more towards the upper grades. But the upper levels are things, synthesis and creation of things, higher level reasoning where you're integrating ideas, the kinds of things that we definitely want our kids in high school for sure doing. But again, we're used to thinking on the scale of Bloom's taxonomy. So depth of knowledge is basically like Bloom's taxonomy, and it includes concepts from it for how we think about our content standards and how we think about complexity for content standards. So, so we have 1 through 4 in terms of Webb's depth of knowledge. But again, level 4 for him involves synthesis. So when you're starting to hear about depth of knowledge, it's talking about level of complexity, and it does tie in with Bloom's taxonomy. It's just a little bit of a shift in how to think about it in terms of it's just a better fit for instruction. And of course, we're always, not reinventing the wheel, but advancing the wheel and making it more complicated. Not complicated, but more sophisticated for the situation, to describe the situation that we're working with.
Okay. So this is another tool that you can use as a teacher. I actually think that I will use this a lot when I'm trying to think about how to teach these depth of knowledge with the standards. So if you know that the standard you are teaching goes up to depth of knowledge level 2, yeah, you might want to look at it. You can't, you look at me. You know that you have to be, you can be using these kinds of activities in your lesson so that they will be able to reach that standard. But you also have to remember, well, of course, you have to do all this recall and reproduction before you even get to this basic skills and concepts. And so these 2 are the ones that you're focusing on if it's a DOK level 2 standard. Does that make sense? But it's just kind of nice to know even what level 3 and 4 look like, especially for those students who, in kindergarten, who maybe can be pushed a little more into DOK level 3. I'm sure you have some that could be.
And then the other thing you can kind of see with this is why they made the jump to depth of knowledge. So like level 2, it's kind of hard to make out with the color of this thing, but this here is all, comes under depth of level 2, depth of knowledge level 2. But it's involving some application, some at the application level, or some of the more basic skills. So it's kind of this weird wraparound. But anyway, the depth of knowledge is just, it pulls from aspects of Bloom's just to make it a little bit clearer about the different levels.
Oh, and I was just going to say, I was going to pause for a second and have you guys turn and talk to your neighbor about maybe this last quarter when you were teaching that standard 1, or you can think of another standard that you taught in 2 or 3 that went up to the level 2. How did you do that maybe this last quarter? What kinds of activities maybe did you already use last quarter that kind of fit in these DOK levels? And maybe, and kind of talk to your partner about what's the difference between level 1 and level 2, and what kinds of things can you do in your class. If you want to take a couple minutes, and then we'll share out. Did a group want to share out a couple things that they talked about as far as the difference of the levels and how maybe they've taught those in their class? Mario Hannigan, can I call on you?
No, estaba preguntando, she was asking me how I did the test.
Oh, okay.
The test was not given in Spanish.
Okay.
But she's not in the dual language school, but has Spanish-speaking kids that don't necessarily understand English.
Oh, okay.
But I did it bilingually just because.
Sure.
And
That's fine.
yeah, Monique Monahan sent out an email to all staff reminding us that it's not a modification, it's best practice to do it bilingual. So.
And we're translating now the CFAs, so you'll give it in one or the other.
So, but if I have to give, if we're not doing it in school, so my grades are based on their comprehension, I'm assuming comprehension in English. of the story. So then I felt like I needed to read the story in English and ask them the questions in English to see how much they're understanding in English, and that's why I didn't do it locally. So I don't know what the feeling is on that.
So you're asking, so you,
So we are not, I could speak Spanish, I could translate the story for them, but I didn't, because since we're not
Sure.
immersion,
sure.
I thought
Yeah.
the
That makes
on the
sense.
report card, the comprehension should reflect their English
You're right,
comprehension.
yeah.
So that's why I stuck with English.
I don't know if I agree with that, because I think that's what whatever you do for bilingual, what's the bilingual test, the test that.
Oh, like the ELPA or the.
Right,
test
because it's
or-
not a test of what their English level is, it's a test of whether they can extract information from the text. So
A
it makes sense to
comprehension
me
Yeah, I agree.
that you would do it in the language if you can.
And I think it comes back to the tool, use the tool in the way that helps you
Yeah.
with the student. So if giving it to the student in Spanish helps you understand that they have the underlying skills, you know, and that they just need to pick up English so that they can do
Yeah.
it in English. On the other hand, if maybe they're a little bit more advanced, not more advanced, but they have more English skills, you might want to give it to them in English to see, okay, are they at a level now where they can do some of this stuff in English? So, but I think, I don't know if there's a perfect answer to
I
it.
know,
think
it's
what
kind of,
works
yeah,
for
it's situational
the
for sure.
child in your
Yeah.
class and what you're going to use the information for. All right?
But I was wondering if anybody wanted to talk about that, about the different levels and how they kind of worked through that to get to DOK level 2? Or what is the difference between level 1 and 2? Do you see that in your class and do?
Some kids aren't ready for them.
Okay.
The two. It is kind of a jump. It's like,
Yeah.
here are facts and now we're doing some inference.
But I think because of dual language, a lot of things like use language structure, word relationship, some of that stuff comes up naturally, which is kind of nice.
Yeah.
You know, cognate, so some of the
Sure.
things we're analyzing just by the nature of me wanting them to understand, you know, everyone to understand what we're doing.
All right.
All right, so basically this is the next thing we're going to talk about is our trajectory of order progressions along a pathway to an end goal. So of course our end goal is the standard that we're teaching, so in this case standard 1. And so all the, on the pre-assessment, remember that we're not testing them on the standard yet, we're just testing on them on all the stepping stones to get to the standard. And so that will give us the information to know what do we need to teach them so that they can get there. And so this is what it looks like, and so this will give you the information I think that that you were talking about. So it tells you exactly, these are the stepping stones. At the very end, the gray box is the standard. And so on, as you guys saw in the pre-assessment in quarter 1, there are questions, these are the ones in purple, are the questions, the types of questions that they get for on the pre-assessment. So if a student gets one of these wrong in the purple boxes, then it tells you, oh, you have to go back and teach these levels right here, if that makes sense.
Where is that progressions checklist? I don't know.
Like, where can you find it? Well, it's on the homestead, right?
Yeah,
The
that
homestead
one's
site.
a list. So, it's a good question.
It is, yeah.
We'll find out for you and let you know, because right now it's on the website that's off the district, and what they've been saying is that they want to put it on a district website, but they don't have the capability for our web system right now. So we'll find out.
Like the Susan Richmond.
Yeah,
as
it's
soon as
on
we're sending the
there.
homestead
Yeah.
website.
Have you heard of that one?
Yeah.
So if you ask your coach and your principal, yeah, and they have that website, but yeah, it's not through the district yet. And then the idea is that you put, after your kids take the assessment, you put all their names down here, and then whatever you go through and you figure out what questions what I did is I just marked the questions that they got wrong, and then you can kind of see a pattern. Oh, do they not? How many questions from the DOK did they get wrong, or the DOK 2, and it gives you a good idea. So if they get this one wrong, like I said, it shows you need to go back and make sure they have these different skills taught.
Okay.
And so we thought it would be good to do this activity where you guys have that list. We made a list of students. So we pretended this is from quarter one, the pre-assessment. And if you have this data in front of you, basically how could you analyze this data to put them in appropriate groups and differentiate for them?
So here's your data. So you have the same sheet. And you have information about the kids. So this is, you've given the pre-assessment and you've charted their wrong answer. So if they have an X in these, it means they did not get it correct. And then what you can use this information for is to take a chart like this to then start to group students. And again, for kinder, I mean,
You could just fold it right now, yeah.
So you're only working levels 1 to 2. You can use this information to figure out what kind of groupings might you want to do with your students so that you can reach them at the level that they need in order to meet the standard down the road. Does that make sense? And so with the data, go ahead.
I was just saying, on this big sheet, it gives you some good ways some strategies so that you can adjust your teaching. So if they're at the recall, the DOK1 stage, what can you do? So there's little examples like teach your language, try it, practice it, duplicate it, repeat the process, follow the steps, and then it says what the students are required to do, and then just resources. And it does the same for DOK2. So it's kind of a neat little thing to look at for how to figure out what you can do to help the kids at the certain stage they're at. I was gonna go back to the question so you can see the.
Yeah.
So if you guys want to take a couple minutes and look at our fake results for quarter one, and to kind of figure out where you would put these fake students in the DOK1 and DOK2 columns, and what would you do for them to have that for different cognitive adjustments?
And I made a couple of them have interesting results. So also think about how to wrap your brain around that. So basically, kids that seem to not do well at a lower level but did well at a higher level. Yeah.
Does somebody want to talk about maybe some instructional adjustments that they saw on that graph that would work well in their class? And what students did you guys figure out? Which students would those be appropriate for?
Well, I just suggested that you would do mini lessons more, so you would take, Manuel, Brent, Lindsay, and Patricia, and you would do a small mini lesson with those kids, even maybe a couple over time, because, 5-year-olds aren't gonna sit there forever.
Yeah.
To make sure they get that skill, and then you would do the same kind of idea for doing adaptive knowledge too in both areas, and just make them small
Okay.
mini lessons over repeated time to see that they get the skill.
Good. All right. So just adjusting your small groups according to whatever skill. Okay, good.
The back group had interesting thought on, because one of our students got the first two and then missed the last one, isn't that right? So what was your thought on that one?
They got the last two, and missed the first one.
Yeah. Thank you.
Well, you could go, because you're a kindergarten teacher.
Well, no, I said that'd probably be me, because, I was thinking about this shoes from Grandpa that we just read fairly recently. You can see she's frowning, she doesn't like the skirt, she doesn't like the hats, but she's happy when she gets the boots and she gets the jeans, and you can infer that. But if you asked me to remember, if somebody read it to me and then you said, so what did Grandma give her? And I'd be thinking, what was it, it's a coat, I guess. So for me, the memory is harder than the inferring. So I guess I'd have to go back and work on teaching myself to ask myself questions throughout the story so I could remember it better at the end, or just work on basic memory skills. So that just seems, that's me right there.
Cool. So you have to do both.
So, as a speech pathologist who does a lot of testing, I think it's always important to think about what is your test actually measuring, and we design it to measure these content standards and how they're progressing. But every now and then a different thing enters in, or a kid who has more concerns with memory may find a particular item, more challenging. So again, this gives you a way to kind of think about that. Like, what did happen here? Who was it that did that? Was it me?
It was Lindsay.
Lindsay. Oh, Lindsay. Yeah. So Lindsay, she maybe you just kind of start to see a pattern that there's some kind of memory thing. She has a hard time remembering things, so maybe that's why she missed something.
And
She has a good memory.
What about Mary, who didn't get any wrong? What do we do with her?
Boot her up first grade.
What does that mean though when a student doesn't get any wrong? Does that mean that they're going to get the standard, like we don't have to teach them? No, I'm just kidding. But I mean, does that really mean that they get the standard or just the stepping stones?
Well, the standard was not tested.
Exactly.
It was just the stepping stone, so.
Yeah.
So we still need to teach Mary.
So that's what I was getting at, is that Mary's ready to learn the standard now. It's not that she wasn't tested on whether she got the standard or not. She was just tested on the stepping stones. So we know that she's ready for the standard. So that's good.
Yeah, but we also have to remember that they're just 5 and that they could have just
Sure.
not wanted to answer
Sure.
right, or they were thinking about something else.
Yeah.
Or they,
Sure.
I mean, I don't know. I mean, I think you have to know your students too, or maybe
Yeah.
retest, or sit in a small group like you said, and then decide, oh, I think they really do know this. I think they're just not very effective at
Sure.
taking the test.
Well, and that's why we do those informal formative assessments throughout the quarter too, because like you said, this is one test, but there's lots of other things that we can do to measure along the way before the common formative assessment at the end of the quarter. So.
Back to questions.
Oh, yeah. I mean, that never happens.
What's that?
Are we at that?
around that whole time.
Let me just do that. Oh, this is just an example of how students are put into different groups.
Okay. So I think this kind of explains from the earlier graph, but this is less complicated. It explains basically that, coming up again, we're going to have our pre-assessment for the second quarter. We should be getting soon. And then, like it says here, it begins. And then the in-between time, we should be doing our informal formative assessments. And then, of course, at the end of the quarter, again, the end of the second quarter, we'll give another common formative assessment. So that's just kind of the routine for every quarter. So maybe we can talk a little bit, take some time. What should we be doing right here during this time? What are some ideas for some informal ways to assess students? Who had some really great, I'm sure you guys all know, what are some good ideas, just throw them out there? Because maybe we can help each other to figure out how to do this. What do you guys do in your class?
Shauna and I were talking about using the same style of questions.
Oh, good, yeah.
Just so that the kids get used to hearing those and hearing their peers answer, or thinking out loud and modeling that thought process.
That's good. And you said something interesting too, like practicing the words or vocabulary that maybe they would see on the test, because that's a big part of it. What they do basically is they take the standard and they just make it into a question, and so they have to be used to that. And they have to, like you said, they have to be used to, going into the text and finding the best answer. I noticed just too with my kids that they would pick the wrong answer, but because they're not really reading the question, well, kindergarten is a little bit different, but even still, they're not listening to what the question is. And they're just kind of, oh yeah, that's the answer because I heard it in the story, instead of really thinking, is it the answer?
Or they just use their prior knowledge.
Sure, yeah. And they're not like trying to get it from the text. Yeah. That's good. You guys think of other ways that...
She has a question.
Sure.
That's just a good point to make.
Oh, good, yeah.
When we started this, I was under the impression that
that all this is really building up to help them take those tests when they start third grade.
Sure.
On the tests in third grade, I don't know a lot about them, but it seems to me one of the things they're able to do is refer back to the text that they read when answering the questions. So it's hard for me when I'm giving these tests and I've read it and they don't have anything to refer back to. So I find myself reading it and rereading it and rereading it and rereading it. Part of what I try to do is ask them questions about something that they can refer back to. So if I'm saying, what did the girl put on before she went to school? They have their little sight word reader that they can refer to and practice that skill of
That's good.
looking in the text and finding it, because,
Yeah.
I don't know, that's what I thought this was all supposed to be.
No,
kind of
definitely. When
Going
it-
towards.
Yes, definitely. That's what it's all about when you get up to the older grades. It's all about going back to the text, rereading, highlighting, finding the answer, getting the right answer and the evidence from the text. So yes. And it's okay that at a kindergarten level that they're using their listening skills. You can even tell, even though they can't go back and reread, they're practicing, they're working really hard on listening, on their listening skills so that they can retrieve that evidence from, listening.
But
So.
do you think in the future tests that there's maybe gonna be more pictures for them to look at, or more like a book or something, as opposed to one picture of the cover of the lions, and then I'm reading this text, which they may or may not understand any of what I'm saying. Again, 'cause next time we'll do it in Spanish, but I was doing it in
Yeah.
English. And then I'm reading and rereading and rereading, but maybe something that, if they truly are able to refer back to a text, then maybe they should have access to a text that they can refer back to.
So I wasn't part of the group that made, but I remember today I pulled one up and it did have a lot more pictures and like different
Yeah.
process in it, and there's a picture
At
of
least the
certain
teachers get a
process.
copy of something that,
Well,
like
so I
more
think
of a
there's,
book.
I think they're hearing that and starting to.
I think they're
incorporate
changing
that
that, yeah.
based on
But see,
what I
these
saw
are
today.
good things to bring up because like I said, it is a changing document, so yeah, we'll bring that back as feedback. Yeah. That's good.
So they said the first grade test only had one story, I think my first grade teacher
Oh,
said,
really?
but ours had 3, and my kids were done after 1, and I pushed them to 2. Some kids could do 3, like some of my higher groups, but even if you spread it over time, at what point do you say enough assessment and start teaching?
And we talked about that at our meeting, and it's really up to you. If you think that you get a good assessment of where your kids are at after one story, that's fine.
Okay.
If you really think, there's not enough questions for me to really know, go to 2. You can go to 3, but it's up to you. It
It's
really
not a
is.
requirement that
No.
you have to do all 3.
It's
Okay,
you
well,
can
that's good to know.
do fewer.
And kind of go back to the beginning too, it's a tool for you to use with your classroom.
Yeah.
And
It's,
the idea is that we get a standardized tool that we're all using so that we can all compare our students and understand how they're doing, but at the heart of it, it's to help improve instruction for your students.
hopefully it'll be good too to use during your PLCs to compare data, with other classes too, and kind of help each other. Is that it?
I think so. There was one more side of the notes.
All right.
Kids on A train. Any questions?
Okay, yeah, so we don't have a problem.
So this is question time. How do you guys feel so far? So yeah, like I said, the pre-assessment, how many of you have received your pre-assessments for Code 2 yet? Okay, well you will soon, so hopefully this will help you to kind of decipher how to, what strategies to give your students after they take it.
Thank you.
Thanks you guys.